Attendance enabled. Guys, attendance is enabled. Okay, Tia. So, one of the things that I must tell everyone is that it's fine if you don't have if there are problems with you in all the slots that have been suggested. What I'll do is towards the end, but do fill the form. Okay. The idea is even if you have a problem, just write it there that this is the problem for me. What I'll do is I'll at the end when we have the final count, those people who have some issues with either of the slots, we'll have a meeting together, okay, and then we'll see on a case-to-case basis that like one of the participants actually made a very valid point that the internet is not available within the house, so I have to move out of the house, and at night it is not possible. That is actually a very valid concern. So, um, so such kind of concerns, if they are there, don't worry. We will try to find some solution for it. But please fill up the form. That is the idea, right? I mean, even if you have an issue, just write it there in the form that this is the issue, and we will try to find some solution. Okay. But please do fill up the form. No, but Tia, can you just send some reminder or something like that, so that if the people have not yet sent it, they can send it. So, but it looks like we are leaning towards a Friday night slot as of now. Um, and we'll see, for others if uh, I'll see. Like let's see how many people. As of now, we have a good, solid, majority in the Friday night slot. So let's see what happens. For those students who have some genuine concerns, don't be worried. We will try to find a solution for you as well. But otherwise, try to manage in this Friday slot. It will be very easy for us. Okay. Otherwise, of course, I will like I saw one of the concerns that is a very genuine concern. So if you do have a genuine concern because of which it is becoming difficult for you, we'll find a solution. But try your best actually to manage in that Friday night slot. That will actually ease our our job to a great extent. Okay, how many do I have now? Yeah, 60 seems to be usually 50% attendance is what we start with, so we can start now. Um, so we are going to discuss lecture 8.3. This is not really a lecture on C as such. It's basically a data structures lecture, and in the previous batch as well, I said that the reason I'm actually discussing these things with you is that as a person who's probably teaching computer science to at least some of you guys for the first time. uh, I feel it is my job to intrigue uh, interest in computer science in all of you, right? So I gave them the example of myself that when my interest in computer science got intrigued when my teacher at 10 plus 2 level, I'll be indebted towards him for the rest of my life, because the way he taught us, that actually made my life path pretty clear that I want to do something in computer science. So it is quite possible that some of you uh, just took admissions in Triple IT Lucknow because of the rank that you had, and someone told you it's good, so you simply took an admission, but you probably do not have that much interest in computer science, right? So all these things that we are studying in ITP, the idea is that it should make you more interested towards learning computer science in the rest of your curriculum, right? So you still have 3.5 years of computer science study left. So so my job is really to make you more interested, more self motivated for the rest 3.5 years or so. This is why I started with things like assembly language programming, virtual machines, Linux, Bash. Okay, these are not really things that are related to programming. um, and you will probably get uh, you'll get to study more about it in different subjects, even computer organization related stuff, Boolean algebra and all that and all those things. But I want you guys to be self motivated, and this is why this lecture too is more from the self motivation point, that if you know what is a stack, if you know what is a queue, when you study data structures, it will be much easier for you, and also it will intrigue some interest in you to study more about computer science, right? So this is the reason. I hope people have watched the lecture. Let's have some volunteers. Any volunteers? No, that's odd. Where are my all the time ready volunteers? So does that mean that you guys have not watched the lecture, or what? I mean, what is the reason that I'm not getting any volunteers? So, so absolutely none, is it? Shall I pick people at random then? I don't want to do it. Okay, okay. Anyone who watched the lecture and would like to do, see, it's like this. Even if you cannot answer a particular question, I will always be there. But I want the discussion to be driven by students. That is why uh, I ask you guys to come up and volunteer. So is it like no one watched it? That is really odd. Okay, thank you, Akshay. So Akshay will be one. And as I said, right, if you don't know the answer to a particular question, I will anyhow come in and reply. But I want someone to try at least. So Akshay, tell me your section and roll number. IT8. T8. Okay. Anyone else who would like to try? Even if you watched the lecture, right? Even if your answers are slightly inaccurate or incorrect, that is fine. I'll anyhow pitch in and correct them. But if you have watched the lecture and would like to be a volunteer, it would be good. So no one else other than Akshay. So Akshay, you have the stage kind of thing, right? I mean, uh, you're the only shepherd today. Uh, don't worry, you'll get more marks for it for shepherding us single-handedly in the class discussion thing. So let's start, guys. I'll share my screen. So can you guys see my screen now? You guys can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So so yeah, you can start, Akshay, and I'll be there. Like I won't mute myself today. I'll just like remain unmuted for most of the time, unless Akshay is speaking. And then if there are any issues, I'll come in. Okay, Akshay,
So,
you can start.
so first question, explain in brief the process of function call. So, sir, I think that we need that slide for this, sir.
Thank you.
There
I'll,
needs
I'll
to
I'll
be
I'll open the
something.
slide. I'll open the slides for you, and you can also tell me to move ahead in the slides, and I'll keep on moving the slide. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just a minute. I'll go to the right slide.
Yes, sir. So first thing, that whenever we write a function, so whenever during the time of execution of the program, first we go to main. As soon as we go to main, a part of a memory is reserved for this main function. So in that part there are some variables. So if we declare some variables in main, so we store these variables in that part of the memory only, which is reserved for this main function. Okay, so now if you can see, int v1 is equal to 5. So in the part where the main function, in the part of a memory where there is a main function, so v1, the 5 is stored there. So you can see, sir, I have stored written 5, and yeah, this is the thing. So now we go to the second statement, that is f1. So as soon as we go to f1, f1 is another function. So this is the whole concept behind stack. Stack means that, just for an example, you consider a table, and in that table you start putting up the books one onto the other. So you just put one for the first book, then on top of the first book you put second book, and when you take that book, so you take that book from above. So you don't take the first book first, you take the second book first. So this is the whole thing behind stack. So functions, they all work in stack. So as soon as we call the f1 function and we send the value 5 over the main function, another memory, a part of a memory is stored, is allocated for this f1 function, so, which is enclosed in the red box shown. So now if we go inside f1, you can see f2 is called. So as soon as we call a function, we just go to that function where, and above f1 we place it in stack manner. So now we have moved to f2. In f2, so one more thing, when we move from f1 to f2, we also have to return to f1 after the execution of f2. So in f2 there has to be a statement, there has to be some instruction which will return after executing to f1. So go back to line 11 to on returning. So this statement signifies, or this is an instruction signifying that after the execution of f2 we have to go to f1, and after f2 is called, so we have to go to line number 11. So that statement signifies that. So now print f, so we will print, so that will be printed and then return. Just after returning we will move to the line number 11, and this f2 will end. So the memory which was allocated for f2 will be emptied, so it will be of no, so it will be just empty and nothing will be there. So it
It
will
will be
be
freed.
like,
It will be freed.
yes sir, it will be freed. Now now when we go to 11 line number, we will see that we are calling f3. So now over f1 there will be there will be f3, there will be a block for f3 created, and we will just move to f3. So inside f3, and inside f3 also we will have something which will say, which will tell us where we have to return. So go back to line number 12 on returning. So this will be stored in f3, which after execution of f3 we will return to f1. So f3 v2. So now we go to f3. Inside f3 we are printing. After printing we will just return. So on returning, the memory will be freed and we will move to f1. Now in f1 we will, when we will move to line number 12, we will have a return statement. After returning, its block will be also cleaned and freed. Now we will move to main, and then we have return 0. So after returning, uh, it will be cleared and freed. So the work and the whole programming is executed when we return 0 from the main statement. So this is the concept of stack, and this is how functions work, function calling and all the things.
So now, any questions? So you guys understand that what exactly is happening there, that there are basically memory blocks. Okay, each of these memory blocks are dedicated for the execution of one of the functions. Okay, and of course main is also a function, so the first memory block that gets allocated, it is for main. Then consecutively, as whenever you have a function call, a new memory block is created and added on top of the previous one. Okay, and this continues happening. If let us say the second function called the third function, then you have a third memory block on top of the second one. And as soon as the second function the other function returns, that third memory block will be removed. When the then this function, the one called who called it, gets completed, the second memory block will be deleted as well, and then you'll come back to the main block. Okay, and there are some instructions. It's not written like this, like whatever I wrote, but yeah, it is something similar to this, that you store a return address. Okay, that whenever a particular function completes execution, where should the control go back to? So there is some information stored. Okay, so you'll study more about return addresses when you do some assembly language programming in computer organization. Okay, but this is like the core idea, that basically there is a way to go back to some place and where the control starts re-executing. Okay, so now are there any queries? Okay, uh, I guess if you guys have not watched the lecture, it will probably be difficult for you to understand anyhow. Let's hope that when you watch the lecture, you get all these things. So I'm stopping the share of that slide and I'm going back to the Word document. Okay, so we are back to this Word document. You can see it, right? So we can now move to the next question, Akshay. I think this we have covered. Okay, F1, F2, and
Yes,
F3. So this we have already covered. So let's like go to 3, 4, 5, and 6.
so complete the statement, whatever. So stack uses last in first out. So whatever goes first comes out last. So this is what stack is all about. And you can always think of that example, placing a table and placing all the books over the table and just taking out the books from the top.
Okay, so as he already gave you an example, another way to visualize a stack is, let us say you have a small a thin tumbler, right? And then you're trying to pour biscuits into it, right? So the biscuit that you put inside first goes right at the bottom of the tumbler. So then you put another biscuit, then you put another biscuit, something like this, right? So now when you want to eat biscuits, which biscuit will you take out? The biscuit at the top first, right? And then the next to the top, and the one that you poured, that you put inside the first, right? That will be taken out at the end. So this is similar to what a stack is. Okay, a stack is a kind of a data structure where you store data, but you know it's like this: the data that gets stored in the stack first, that is taken out in the last. Yeah, so Aditya, that is the idea. Even I was not too sure. The problem is that this is not a part of the C standard or language standard. So um, it is a bit unsafe to say that what is the size of the stack. Most probably, this is what I read on online, that the implementations are free to do their own optimization. So it's like this: um, there is a good chance that the stack size is dependent on the number of local variables that you are going to create there. Okay, so a good compiler will just make sure that only that much amount of space is allocated. That is just enough to run the program. Yeah, so that is LIFO. LIFO is last in, first out. Okay, that is the idea, that whatever goes in at the and at the end, that is taken out. Okay, just imagine stack, as I said, like a tumbler, or as he said, like a stack of books. Um, Another example is, as I told you guys, I think in the previous weeks, that if you go to these parties, right, where they have these plates and napkins stacked up, right? When you go and pick up the plate, you don't pick up the plate that is at the bottom or in the middle. You pick up the plate that is put on top, right? And slowly the plates go away. So the plate, when at that but when it was put like this, when the caterer would have put the plates there, most probably that is not most probably, that is exactly how it would have been happening, right? That the first plate would have gone in at the bottom, then the second plate comes on the top of it, and so on and so forth, right? So this is the idea, that in the stack, um, you actually take out the things one at a time, and you put things one at a time, and only the thing that is on top of the stack is accessible. Others are not accessible to you. It's similar to, like, you cannot take out a plate from in between, otherwise the whole stack will fall. Or you cannot take out a biscuit from middle of the tumbler. You have to take out the biscuits on the top. So something like this. So stack is like a is a data structure, which restricts the input and output. Okay, the restriction is you can only input something on the top, and you can only take out something that is on the top. So that is a restriction of stack, and that is why it is last in, first out. I think we have also discussed the top variable. Uh,
Yes, sir. So in stack we have two functions. First is push, second is pop. So both the functions take place from the top variable also. So in the biscuit example, we are pushing the biscuit from the top and taking out the biscuit from the top. So the top is the last biscuit that is there in that tumbler. So this is the top variable in stack, and all the operations take place from the top variable only.
okay. So you understand, right, that I only, because there is only one end of a stack that is open. Okay, the other end is kind of closed. Okay, so everything goes in from one end, and goes out from the same end. So the top variable, okay, it simply points to the currently available uh, data in the stack, right? That is where the top points to. You only need one variable in a stack. um, and contrary to that, Akshay can start with question 5 and 6.
Yes, sir. So queue. So complete the so whatever goes first in queue comes out first. So it is first in, first out. So in order to understand what a queue works, how queue works, so you can take an example of a ticket counter. So where there is an queue, so the person who goes first will take the ticket and move out from the first. And when you enter, so you will stand at the back. So we are popping something. So we are entering from the back and moving from the front. So that's how a queue works. First in, first out.
And 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 similarly, because queue is a two-ended data structure, insertions occur at one end, and deletions occur at the other end. uh, this is why you need two variables, right? I mean, basically, one variable points to the value that was just inserted, and one value points to the value that will be deleted next, right? So you enter a queue from the rear, and you exit the queue from the front, and this is consistent with how queues are in real world, right? In real world, let us say you go to some place where there is some kind of a queue, right? How do you manage it? You basically enter the queue from the back. You have to go and stand in the queue at the back, and then people keep going out of the queue from the front, right? So let us say on a railway reservation counter, you go and stand at the back, and then people keep on moving from the front, and then at some point of time you will be at the front, and you reserve your tickets or whatever it is, and then you go out. So that is the it's the same concept, but in computer science, you have a queue data structure. So queue has again, it's similar to stack. It does restrict you from accessing something that is in between. Okay. The only thing that is accessible to you uh, is the element at the front, and the only place where you can enter the queue, where a new element is added, is the rear. Okay. um, so so queue is a two-ended data structure. Whatever goes in first, it comes out first. And because so it's more like a pipe, right? Whatever flows from one end, it reaches the other end first. Okay. Whereas stack is more like a tumbler. Okay. Whatever you keep on putting, the last thing that you put, that has to come out first. Okay. So I think this was the overall idea of this lecture. Um, because you guys have probably not seen the lecture, you don't have too many queries, but still, if you have some queries, you can ask. No, Akansha. The NQ and DQ, they are different from push and pop, because NQ can still be considered to be the same as push in some ways, right? Because we are essentially adding something towards the end of the array, right? But DQ and pop are completely different. DQ will take out the element from the front of the array. Pop will take out the element from the end of the array. Okay. So these are two terms actually: NQ, DQ, push and pop. These are standard terms associated with the data structure. Any more questions, queries? Okay, so well, from my end, I think the lecture is all but over. There is one question on, I think, uh, previous lecture that I will take up. But other than that, any questions related to this lecture? Okay, if you have none, then thank you, Akshay. Yeah, Aditya, you can ask your question then. Okay, we have some question. Uh,
So,
just a minute.
so
We
when I
have
try,
some. Just a minute. We do have some questions. Sanskriti has one. So it's like NQ and DQ. Yes, yes, Sanskriti. That is exactly the same. So NQ and DQ are operations that are associated with a queue, and push and pop are operations that are associated with a stack. So you don't say NQ something in a stack. That is not a statement that is valid. Okay. If you say I want to add something to the stack, you say push something to the stack. Okay. Similarly, you don't say something like something from a queue. No, you DQ something from the queue. No, Dhruv, I did not. Actually, I thought circular queue will be a bit. I have put it in, I think, the additional reading section. I have put some links to it. So, as I said, right, the idea is really to intrigue, um, and I don't want people to be overburdened. So, there might even this much might be a bit difficult for people to understand. So, I have not uh, talked about circular queue. But the idea is, if you actually see the queue implementation that I have shown in the presentation, you'll understand that there is a very major uh, a major problem with this implementation. The moment you understand what is that problem, then you can probably understand why do we need a circular queue. Oh, there is some question. How can push and pop file? No, they are not. They are not defined. They have to be defined by you. You will have to create them. Stack to do so stacks. Yeah, so stack is a data structure. Just a minute. So Sanskriti, I didn't get your actual question. What exactly does it mean? Push and pop while
So
function.
that push and pop we use only for adding elements.
Mm-hmm.
Means
So
is
so
it
like
used only for adding elements?
yeah. It is only used for adding and deleting elements from a stack. And as I said, so you will have to create these functions. It is not a part of your standard C library. Uh, so okay, maybe I should have given you guys C code for it. Is it?
Yes, sir,
Uh,
sir. The syntax of stack and all the things were missing, so sir, it was confusing.
So shall I send you guys the what I'll do is I'll write some C code for stack and queue, and I will put it in the week 8 example programs folder. Okay, it is not covered in the lecture, but I will put the code in there, right? So you can actually see what I mean by stack and queue, right? Uh, yeah, so stack is used actually for this. Okay, if you want to convert infix to postfix, people use stack to do this. Okay, it's easier to do it with stack. Um, so that is actually that is actually a use case where stack is used. So any more queries, guys? I understand that we may not have too many, but still. And I will write the code, some C code for stack and queue. It's not too much actually. I can simply change the basic array operations uh, program, and I can like copy it into two versions, stack and queue, and then I simply, so all you have to do is, if you use the basic array operations code, you just have to restrict the input and output. That's it. Okay, that is actually a more generic program. There you can do insertion anywhere, you can do deletion anywhere. Here, you'll have to fix that insertions will happen only here and deletions will happen only here, or something like this. Okay. Any more queries on yeah.
So you can explain the working of recursions through function calls. So that is also complicated. How stacks, matlab how recursions work on that.
Yeah, so basically you saw what happens, right? So that question, right? F1, F2 and F3. The idea was that you understand that if F1 calls F2 and F2 calls F3, this is what happens. The memory for executing F3 gets on top of F2, and the memory for executing F2 sits on top of F1. Now, if you are using recursion, so what happens? F1 calls F1, right? So now there are two memory blocks in the memory for F1. One is for the like parent, and one is for the child. Okay, the child is basically the second call. Okay, so if you do recursion, there will be those many number of memory blocks, okay, on top of each other. So if F1 calls F1 5 times, there will be like 5 plus 1, 6 blocks of F1 in the memory, one on top of the other. The most recent one is at the top, and then when this one returns, that block gets removed, the next one is active, then that one, when that one returns, the next one uh, becomes active, something like this. So let me just write it like this. So let us say F,
And so how
uh,
continuous returning takes place, so that is also interesting.
so
So one,
returning is, yeah. So essentially, returning basically means, um, this has something to do with assembly language programming. So during assembly language programming, there are no concepts of a function. Okay, there are only addresses. You move from one address to another address. So the technology that is used to implement an if condition is the same as the technology that is used to implement a loop, and it is the same as the technology used to implement a function. They are all simply jump statements, move to or go to statements. Okay, so you simply say, if I want to execute a function, you say please go to memory location this much. Okay, and then whatever instruction, so the program counter, it starts executing from a different location, and when the function returns, you want the program counter to go back to the position from where the function call was made. So in order to go back, you have to store that address, that where exactly was the program counter before this jump happened, right? So this is where those that return information is used, that whenever a function is called, I need, before breaking and going up to that location where the code for the function is written in assembly language, I need to store the current address wherever I'm executing right now. Okay, and that is stored in some place in the memory, and that is the return information. Okay, and so I was telling something like this. Let us say f1 calls f1, and then it again calls f1, and of course f1 may have been called from main. In the memory it will look something like this. At the bottom there will be a block for main, and then whenever this f1 call is made, a block of memory will be added for this f1. And let me just make it like this, uh, like this, so that you understand this, that this is basically the first call to f1, this is the second call to f1, and this is the third call to f1. So then there is, so on top of the main, some memory is allocated that is dedicated to f11. Then some memory gets allocated that is dedicated to running f12, and then some memory is allocated to run f13. Now when this function returns, let us say at this point of time I reach uh, the base case. Okay, you remember what is the base case in the recursion, where the recursion ends, you return something trivial. So let us say in the third call to f1, I now have a base case, I simply returned a value. So now this chain will break. Okay, so now this block will be removed, I will go back here. Now whatever happens, this function will also return its final value. So this blocks get removed, then I go here, this block gets removed, and I am back to main. And if you remember, I said recursion is heavy. It can cause problems. This was the reason, that if you have a long chain of recursion, so let us say if this chain continues for a very long uh, time, right? So let us say you have a million functions in recursion, then you will eventually run out of memory to allocate on top of the other. Okay, so this is why recursion is heavy, it's expensive. Okay, because you are using so much of memory every time whenever there is a function call. Okay, so does that give you an idea that why recursion is bad? Because basically you create more memory, you allocate more memory on top of the existing memory, and unless the returns start happening, you have to keep on allocating more memory for each function call. And this is why recursion is heavy, it's intensive on your resources. Okay, and this is why, even though recursion might be a good start to solve a problem, you should always try to uh, come up with an iterative solution. That is the idea. Okay, any questions on this? I know that it may not be too clear to you guys all. uh, Aditya wrote something, I'll just read it. Aditya, this is about structures, right? I'll just read it, but let me take up the other questions. Uh, Yes, so they are not freed until they return. Okay, so Sanskriti, so a function's memory is only freed when when its execution is complete. Okay, and its execution completes when the last statement of the function has been executed. So till then, the memory has to remain in your main memory, that memory block, and that is why if you do one function call in another, the previous function calls memory is still there, but now you have added one more on top of the other, right? So this is basically chaining of functions, right? That there is a chain now, main called f1, f1 called f2, f2 called f3. So now I have four memory blocks at this point of time. Okay, one for main, on top of it for f1, on top of it f2, and on top of it f3. Oh, okay. Just a minute. So I do have a Aditya, let us take your question first and then we can do this because we have around 10-15 minutes. So let me read the question. Uh, yeah, Aditya, go and check the homework. Okay, that is a homework or homework or maybe additional reading. So there is something known as structure padding. Okay, I
Yes,
did
sir,
not
you told it.
right. So this is what happens. So basically, um, okay, let me give you a very brief answer. What happens is something like this. Um, when you create a structure, you can, for example, create an array, a character array of size 3. Okay, how many bytes it will take? 3 bytes. Or you can create a character array of size 5. It will take 5 bytes, right? Now, but you remember, right, that we in computer science we have an affinity towards powers of 2, right? And it's that affinity can be extended to many places. So basically the idea is if you just have a 3 character array in a structure, then or maybe let us say you have an int and a 3 character array, the total amount of space it should take should be 7 bytes. But usually it doesn't take 7 bytes because the the memory input output becomes a bit inefficient. We would like them to be aligned. Okay, aligned is in the sense that there is something known as word alignment. You will read about word alignment once you have done computer organization. But the idea is I will actually sacrifice a few bytes of memory so that I can actually do proper alignment within the memory. So it is a good chance that it will not just take 7 bytes, it might take 8 bytes or 16 bytes or something like this. And so when you do a size of operator over the structure, it will be returned like that. It will be like it will not be 7 but maybe 8 or 16 or 12 or something like that. So that is a memory alignment issue, uh, and this is known as structure padding. So that is why don't ever use that, and that is why from the beginning I have said whenever you use things like malloc, never do size of on never actually put exact constants. Don't put 4, 8, 16. Always do size of and x, right? So that will cover up. If even if your structure is using 8 bytes or 16 bytes, it will cover up those things. Okay, so is that clear? Yes, it is inefficient. It is memory inefficient. But this is the thing. Over the so the evil Indian when you study algorithms, there will be a subject on algorithms. You will know that there are two things that we study about a particular algorithm. There is a time complexity that I guess your seniors may have already told you, right? Order 1, order n square, capital O notation, big O notation. So your seniors may have told you about what is a big O notation, what is order n, what is order n square. The same thing is also done for space. Okay, so every algorithm also has a space complexity. Whatever you have studied, that is time complexity. Similarly, we also have a space complexity, and there is a general rule in in uh, in computer science. It applies most of the time that if you want to reduce the time complexity of an algorithm, usually there is a trade-off between time and space. Okay, in many cases if you increase the space complexity, that is you occupy more space, there is a chance that you might be able to reduce the amount of time it takes. Okay, so all those dynamic programming problems, I'm not sure whether you have heard about it or not, but dynamic programming, memoization, they do exactly the same. Okay, they use more space. Okay, they create a table and store some values somewhere, and what they do is, with the help of using more space, they reduce the time. Okay, this is why dynamic programming is used, that you actually trade off space in order to get better time. And the idea is, usually in computer science, space is inexpensive, right? So I can afford to take up a few more bytes, a few more kilobytes, to be honest. It doesn't matter, because today our computers have GBs of of main memory and TBs of hard drive, right? So a few more bytes, it doesn't hurt, but we would like things to be faster. That is the idea. So this is why, things like structure padding, what they do is, you'll understand why it is better. You understand why we do structure padding when you study computer organization. So essentially, if your structure is split across two system words, that is the idea, then you'll have to make two reads in order to read the complete structure. But if your structure is placed in such a way that it is within a same word or some number of words, then that is more efficient time wise. Okay, so it is inefficient space wise, but it is more efficient time wise. That is the idea, Aditya. So this is why we add more space to it, and store it like this. Okay, I hope this answers your question. You'll know more about it when you study computer organization, and when you understand the concept of a word. That is the idea. Okay. Any more questions? Otherwise, I have some 8-9 minutes. So as Dhruv said, maybe I can just go through the slides of stack and queue. If you have any more questions, we can answer first. Okay. So then what I can do is, I can just like go through the slides related to stacks and queues. I mean, just the operation part, not the complete thing. The example part. I'll just start from here. Share. So I will not be able to check your chats now, because I am going into full screen mode. If you have a problem, just unmute and speak. Okay. Laser pointer. So this is the idea. Okay, I'm trying to emulate. Let me say this out aloud. We are emulating a stack using an array. Okay, so it is possible for you to access all of these elements at any point of time, because it is an array. You can access this element by doing ARR2, or this element by doing ARR3. But as of now, I'm trying to emulate a stack. So this means that these elements are not accessible to me. Anything on the left of this is also not accessible to me. So let us say we start this in the beginning. Of course, I have not put the first slide actually. uh, just a minute. Let me see if I have that picture. Just a minute. uh, where did I do that? I have it. Stack wala ka. Yes, here. Okay, so let me actually show you the image that I created, and from there you can understand this. Stack. So can you guys see this tab now? And can you see my mouse pointer? That is another thing.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then, okay, so this is the start. I have not put these things there because there was not enough space in the slide. So this is the idea. In the beginning, you have the stack as empty. This is an empty stack. There are no elements. and I start the value of top at, let us say, -1. Okay, so -1 means that my stack is empty. Then when I push one element to it, this is what happens. The element 12 gets pushed up at element 0, and then top becomes 0. When I do another push, then 21 comes right after 12, right? So this is the idea. Top is pointing here right now. Okay, when I do another push, top starts pointing here. Okay, when I do another push, top starts pointing here. So you can see that the element that I added first, that has gone behind. And as I said, even though it is an array and you can always do ARR 0 equal to something, uh, we are not really allowed to do that. That is the idea, right? That, I mean, we are restricting ourselves to only the element on the top. So the only element that is accessible to the outside world is this, okay, 39 as at this moment. And then when I do a pop, it basically pops out the element that was on top of it, 39. So now my top is here. Okay, only this element is accessible. I do another pop, and now the 21 thing goes out as well. So now my top is here. I do another push, it gets added here. Okay, and this is the idea. The addition, the insertion and deletion always occur at the topmost index of the array, right? Just after the top variable. Okay, and of course you understand that at some point of time this array will become full. So if, let us say, at this point of time I do some more pushes. Okay, let me see if I can just add it right now. Okay, so let's say I make another push. I make it 65. So then 65 comes here, and this becomes 3. I do another push, and let's say I make it what? Hmm, make it 77 or whatever it is. So then this becomes 77, and now my top is 4. Okay, so now I call this condition to be the fact that my stack is full now. Okay, so I cannot entertain any more pushes. Okay, so this is the case where my stack is full, and this is the case where my stack is empty. So at this point of time I cannot do any pops, and at this point of time I cannot do any pushes. Okay, and this is similar to the case where we were trying to do insertion in an array that was full, and we were trying to do deletion on an array that was empty. So now let me go back to the chat thing. So is it clearer now, guys? What is a stack? Does that make it a little more clear? So essentially it is a data structure which only allows insertion and deletion at one end. Okay, and and let me also check if I have the queue thing. uh, so similarly it is for queue. In the beginning the queue is empty, right? And when you do enqueue, it gets added here, and your rear, in the beginning your rear and front both are pointing to -1, for example. And then when you added the first element, rear and front become 0. When you add another element through enqueue, rear moves ahead, it goes to 21, and front is here. So rear is here, front is here. Now you do another enqueue, then rear is here and front is here. Now if you do a dequeue, this one goes out. Okay, now only 21 and 39 are left. Okay, now you do another dequeue, then front also comes here, front and rear both are here. Okay, another enqueue, and this becomes 43. Another enqueue, and this becomes 57. Okay, and this is the problem with this implementation of queue, that at this point of time I cannot add another element to my queue, even though I have two memory locations that are available to me. Okay, because my front has gone ahead, I cannot add any element here. And this is what I said, that usually when we use queue, we use circular queues. Okay. So the idea of a circular queue is that basically now I'll bring my rear here. Okay. If there is another NQ request, I will bring my rear here. Okay. My front will be here. But did not want to complicate it uh, unnecessarily. But that is the concept of a circular queue, that if I do another NQ operation here, let me just add it. Let me say if I do 65, this will go here and my rear would become 0. That is the idea. So basically it is now your queue is circular now, right? It is like this. It starts from here and it moves like this. That is the concept of a circular queue. Okay. Um, so does it make sense, guys? I know that you might not have seen the lecture, so these things may sound a bit weird to you, but but just have a look at it, right? I mean, I think I'll put the recording for the class discussion anyhow. So maybe after you have watched the lecture, you can come back and see this recording. Okay, that might actually clear up your doubts.
And so in circular queue, what if the front is occupied? So front is 0 and rear becomes n minus 1.
Front is 0 and rear becomes n minus 1. Then that is the actual case of the queue being full. Okay, so as long as the idea is that circular queue, it allows you to use up all the space in the queue. Okay, and a general queue, uh, so this is what I have put in the homework. So in this case, for example, one option that I have is that I shift everything to the left. Okay, so I now bring 39 here, I bring 43 here, and I bring 57 here. I make front here, and I take my rear here, right? So in that way I can actually accommodate more elements, and this is what we used to do in deletion, right? In deletion we used to shift the elements to the left so that space is created, right? So we can certainly do it like this, that every time there is a space that gets created, I actually shift everything to the left, and then I have my spaces available. But usually we don't do that. We simply shift the pointer, and then we will have these two places left. If your front is here and your rear is here, then it means that all your memory locations are filled up, and then your queue is actually full. In this case, you might seem that the queue is full, but the queue is not really full. It's just that the spaces that you have, they are before the front variable and they are not accessible now. Okay. Any more questions?
Sir, in the homework, there was a statement like word size, processing word size will be 4 bytes. So what does word size means?
Uh, did I write these things in homework? Is it?
Yes, sir, it's in that padding homework. Fifth
Acha,
line.
acha, okay. So that is the idea. I mean, I don't want to actually talk about word size, but let me give you a simple idea. So when we do this read and write from a memory or to a memory location, we don't do it at a single byte level. Okay, so we read some number of bytes in a bunch. Okay, so we don't read single bytes, we read, let us say, 4 bytes or 8 bytes or something like this, right? So the amount of a memory that we read or write in one go, okay, it is not really the word size. That is usually the term is block. But for for an easier understanding, just assume that a word is essentially a unit of operation, a unit of storage. Okay, um, so even though you are allowed to create variables that are of size 1 byte or 2 bytes, in the memory it's managed in a different fashion. Okay, so one word is basically some number of bytes. Okay, so
So,
so
sir,
yeah, go ahead.
Sir, it would mean like a character also takes 4 bytes and double also take 4 bytes.
Uh, so not really, and I mean, so how should I explain it to you? So basically, what you can do, for instance, is that let us say your word size is 8, okay, 8 bytes or so, something like this, and you have so when you declare two integers, they can easily fit in. So in one word, you can fit in two integers. But let us say you declare one integer, uh, one short, and one character. So they are 7 bytes, right? That is the idea. So then it is inefficient. Inefficient as in, so this structure which has one integer, one short, and one char, that is supposed to take 7 bytes, right? So how can I store it in the memory? They'll either be split across two words, right? I mean, let us say 4 bytes are in one word and 3 bytes are in another word. uh, as of now, just consider words are more like, they are like batches, okay, they are like blocks of addresses. So you say address 0 to 7, address 8 to 15, address 16 to 23, okay. So if you start your allocation from the middle of a word, then the 7 bytes will be split up across two words, right? uh, but that is inefficient, and that is the problem, that you will have to read two words in order to read this structure. But if I do some kind of, that is what is called a structure padding, that I do some padding, I actually waste some memory spaces, so that uh, I can read all the elements of a structure in minimum number of word reads. That is the overall idea. That is why we do some kind of alignment in the memory. Okay. Don't be worried much about it, about structure padding as of now. You'll understand what is structure padding once you know the idea of a word, and this idea of the word you will study in computer organization. Okay.
Sir, if like we are saying that we do alignment to make it less like in one word to make our
Mhm.
code. So if I put an extra space in my code, it would mean that it takes one extra byte and it would disrupt the orientation.
That is the idea, that this is what is managed by your compiler. Okay, that is why if you do a size of operator on the structure, it will not give you 7 bytes, but it will give you 8 bytes. Okay, that is the idea. That is exactly what Aditya asked. That in this case, your compiler will basically add some spaces, so that the alignment works. So let us say if you have three structure variables, they'll if you do not have padding, what will happen? The first one will be allocated, let us say, from address 0 to address 6. The second one will start at address 7 and it will go up to address 13. The third one will start at address 14 and go up to 20. Instead of that, what the compiler will do is it will allocate first one at address 0, and it will take 8 bytes. Okay, so the next structure variable is allocated at byte number 8, address 8. The third one gets allocated at address 24. So then what happens is, in order to read any of these structures, I only need to read one word. But if I do it without any spacing, to read the second structure, I will have to read the first word as well as the second word. To read the third structure, I will have to read the second word as well as the third word. That is the problem. Right? It is about alignment. Okay. If I say that in one go, you can read memory addresses 0 to 7. In the second go, you can read memory addresses 8 to 15. In third go, you can read memory addresses 16 to 23. And now you tell me, like, I want to read the second structure variable. Which word should I read? If you do padding, you only have to read the memory location 8 to 15. If you do not do padding, you will also have to read the first word. Is it getting clearer?
Yeah, yes, sir, it's clear. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is all about alignment. You want to align your data in the memory in such a way that your structure can be read in minimum number of reads. Okay. So there are so many things. It depends on the word size of your machine. It depends on the size of different data types that are stored in your structure. Okay. So the structure padding is more on that lines. It's a very complicated algorithm, by the way. I think I did pass on the link. There is a link, a Stack Overflow link that you can go and read, but you may not understand it. It's a very complicated algorithm that how exactly is structure padding done. But the idea is, the overall idea is you want things to be aligned, well aligned. That is the only idea. Okay, so I think we are done, and let me stop this. So guys, let's break now, and please respond to Tia's emails. Tia will also send you guys a reminder. But let us try to find a solution to this problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.